OP17, where the world's strongest warriors collide, is going to be the 4th anniversary set for the One Piece card game. Let's talk about the new leaders and leaks that we've seen so far and how they may end up stacking up into the old meta. Anniversary sets are historically very big, whether it's the first appearance of Gear 5 in OP05, the Yonko in OP09, or the Three Brothers as well as the King of the World Imu in OP13. OP17 is surely going to be an exceptionally powerful set as the old Yonko are coming back into the game, with some intense events ahead of us such as the Flame Fruit Coliseum, as well as the countless number of regionals and nationals as people try to qualify for Worlds. This is definitely going to be one of the most hyped sets that we've ever had. That means that we need to know as soon as possible what the best decks are going to be in the format. Unfortunately, without the full card list, it's very hard to tell, but what I can tell you without the full card list is that Opera GX is the best browser in the game. That's right, Opera GX is now a long-term sponsorship of the channel, and I am truly grateful because it's thanks to you that they've decided to reach out to me once again. You guys gave Opera GX a chance after my sponsorship before, and more importantly, you kept using it. So let me tell you a little bit about how cool this browser is, because I have also permanently flipped over to Opera GX. Not only is it extremely easy to multitask thanks to the video pop-out feature, allowing you to drag the video anywhere on your desktop wherever you please, customizing exactly how you want to experience it, but it goes even further than that with a built-in split screen display, so you can very easily customize and adjust the experience just the way that you want it to. Now, you may have also noticed that I've had a couple of highlighted tabs in the corner. These are tab islands, which I can collapse and reopen at ease, which keep all of my tabs organized. This alongside workspaces to separate my normal browsing from my other things, such as my trip details, makes it extremely easy to sort your browser experience and never have a million tabs open and completely unorganized, because Opera GX just does everything for you. For someone like me who prioritizes functionality first, this is definitely the best browser that there is on the market, with even some amazing features like a RAM limiter to make sure that your browser isn't hogging your entire RAM stick. I have permanently switched over to Opera GX, and if you want to too, make sure to click the link in my description below to download Opera GX today and quit your bad browser. Thank you to Opera GX for sponsoring this video, and let's talk about some Yonko. The reason why I say that these cards are going to affect future sets as well is because you have to remember that every single manga rare card within a set is going to be permanently usable despite rotation, which means that all of these Yonko, despite how powerful they are going to be permanently usable in their respective color for the rest of time, which means that this is going to be an extremely crucial set, not just obviously for this metagame, but for the color going into the future as well. I wanted to preface the video by saying this because I think that the red Newgate might be one of the saviors of red for the rest of time, essentially, in this card game. Every leader in OP17 is going to be monocolor, and our red leader for OP17 is going to be Edward Newgate himself, returning from OP02. Edward Newgate, when the opponent attacks once per turn, can turn any one of the cards in your hand into plus 4,000 power. This is an exceptionally powerful effect in a lot of circumstances, just an extremely powerful version of Red Blue Ace's leader effect, which is very fitting for the man himself. But more than the leader, I think that the 10-cost Newgate is one of the most powerful cards that Red has seen in a very long time. This is a 10-cost 12,000 power character where if the opponent has a 10,000 power or higher character, then, well, it's just a 6-cost 12,000 power character that has the on-play effect where if your leader is monocolor, which is the first time we've seen an effect like this, your leader becomes base 8,000 power until the next turn, meaning that on the opponent's turn, you're going to be 8,000 power. Regardless of if you're a base 6,000 power leader or 5,000 power leader, you will become 8,000 power for the remainder of that turn, with 4 dong to spare if the opponent's also been playing rather large characters. This card, were it not locked to monocolor leaders, could be absolutely devastating in many decks such as Red Blue Ace or even Red Black Sabo, but thankfully, because it's locked to a very, I'll have to say it, bad color, that means that we're gonna have to play the card in Red Newgate, the OP09 Red Shanks, or Red Ace, who I think can use this card the best. Red Ace already runs the Whitebeard Pirates package, and in extra format can also use the 1-cost Easel to search them with a lot more ease as well. This deck has already seen some promise in OP16, especially as a counter deck into Green Blue Luffy, but especially in OP17, I don't see how this deck is ever going to end up losing to a deck like Green Blue Luffy, when you have the ability to go for 12,000 rush while making your leader 8,000 power until the end of the next turn. Green Blue Luffy was a deck that was very good at spamming 6,000 power attacks at the opponent. 7,000 power was still doable because it was just 1 extra dong on your characters, but 8,000 power has generally been the threshold for this deck on where it could actually reach and overcome. Because you need to attach so many dong to your characters, things like Navy Headquarters don't actually have that much use when the opponent's power is 8,000, and therefore this specific stat line is extremely good when you think about the meta as a whole. Now, Red Ace already has a very good matchup into Green Blue Luffy, just due to the fact that you have things like the 6-cost Vista that can very easily get rid of the opponent's board, while also, of course, just having rush characters to help manage the opponent's board as well, and really be able to take the battle to them. With this new 10-cost Newgate in the deck, I don't see how you ever lose to a deck like Green Blue Luffy anymore, and that's going to be very important, seeing how prevalent this deck has suddenly become in the OP16 metagame. On top of that, just having a 12,000 power rush character is just really good into basically any deck because, well, it's going to be coming out for 6 dong as well. So with that last 4 dong, you could play out something like the 4-cost Luffy, or even just spread out your dong to make your attacks that much stronger. All in all, if I were to give the cards in this video a ranking, I would give the new 10-cost Newgate an S tier ranking because this card is so universally usable in every mono red deck. The issue is that there aren't very many good red decks in the meta right now. So I believe that because this card, having a manga parallel, will be usable for the rest of time, I think that someday it'll have its time to shine in a mono red deck when Bandai decides to stop shafting that color. The red Newgate leader, on the other hand, I am a lot less optimistic for just because it feels like a downgraded version of red blue ace in a lot of times. Well, yes, the plus 4,000 power from your leader effect is going to be very, very nice in a lot of scenarios. Most of the time, you don't necessarily need that much power, and the opponent knowing that you have that at your disposal will just hit you at lower threshold. Newgate's very good at stopping larger attacks, but in this meta where there's so many smaller attacks like green blue Luffy going around, I don't see this leader really standing out from the rest, especially when you compare it to a deck like red ace, which can give the 10-cost Newgate rush, or even red Shanks, who has a leader effect that works really well with the 10-cost Newgate. It's for this reason I'm going to give the red Newgate leader and the leader effect a D tier ranking, just because I think that there are other decks that can probably do it a lot better, but who knows, with enough leader locked cards, we may end up playing this deck over other mono red options. And though I may be underwhelmed by the red Newgate leader effect, the same cannot be said for the green cards within this set. Green Shanks is going to be our mono green representative in OP17, and oh my god, this card is basically just a power crept green Bonnie, because this leader, when you trash or rest 1 dong card, activate main once per turn, you can lock one of the opponent's rested characters. This leader effect alone, I believe, is very scary because it's generic. Part of the reason why Green Bonnie was so good, so universally powerful ever since it came out in OP7 is because the leader effect is just universally good. If you just play all of the good green cards, then you're just going to have a good deck because you have a generally good leader effect that works with any single card. While you see some decks like Bello Betty randomly pop up out of nowhere and be extremely meta for one set, you won't see them really lasting all too long because they don't really have longevity unless Bandai prints more cards for them. Therefore, they need to purposefully buff that leader for them to actually stay meta relevant. However, a deck like Green Bonnie and now Green Shanks have the merit of just being able to play good cards in their deck because their leader effect is generic. As long as green cards are good, these leaders will always be good. And you just need to choose what's the best flavor of green generic leader, whether it's going to be Green Bonnie or even things like Green Mihawk or now Green Shanks. However, though this leader effect is generic, that isn't to say that we haven't had some really good support as well, because for green, we've seen 2 SRs so far. The 5-cost Yesop as well as the 10-cost Shanks. Let's look at the 5-cost Yesop first. This is a 5-cost 6,000 power character with 1,000 counter, which on play draws 1 card and rests one of the opponent's 8-cost or less characters, and at the end of your turn restands one of your Red Hair Pirates cards. Now this first part of the effect works perfectly with your lead effect, especially when you're going first on 5 dong. Because on 5 dong, you're going to be drawing 1 card and resting one of the opponent's characters, basically guaranteed. You can then trash that card that you just drew to stun whatever character was just played. Now, generally, there aren't that many powerful 4-costs in the game right now that you want to lock with your leader effect, but that's an option. But I think that the stronger way to use this is if you go second, because on 6 dong, you can rest a character while just getting a card for free and use your last dong to lock a character instead. Now this is a lot more powerful because there are so many powerful 5-costs in the game compared to 4-costs. 5-cost is generally going to be the premier stat line, 5-cost 6,000, 5-cost 7,000, and being able to deny these cards the ability to attack while also drawing a card is going to be very, very powerful. It's for that reason I think that a card like 7-cost Hody could also be very good in this deck as well. Just being a 7-cost 8,000 power character that can rest 2 of the opponent's characters while having rush gives you a very aggressive line into the game while also denying the opponent their aggression as well through your leader effect. But so because your leader effect is so good at dealing with rested characters, why not talk about the most broken green card that I've probably ever seen, and one that again has a monger, meaning that it's going to be part of the game forever, the 10-cost Shanks. This 10-cost 12,000 power character has rush and on play, restands 2 of your dome cards and rests all of the opponent's characters. Let's compare this to 10-cost Roger. 10-cost Roger is a 10-cost 13,000 power rush, which essentially stops your opponent from using blockers once you or the opponent are at 0 life. 10-cost Roger is probably one of the most problematic cards that exists within the game, but it's okay because it's in red, and as we mentioned, red just in general isn't very good. Still, the decks that can use this, like Red Blue Lucy or Red Blue Ace, absolutely abuse this card once they go down to 0, just being able to break through with all the power that they've been building up for the entirety of the game. This green 10-cost Shanks, on the other hand, can basically be read as this. Your opponent can't use their blockers in the same way that Roger can't use their blockers. You have a 10-cost, effectively 14,000 power rush character, but it can come out on curve and can be used defensively as well. where Roger is only an aggressive tool that can close out the game once you or the opponent are at 0 life. Shanks comes down any point after you reach 10 dong, can clear the opponent's board, and most importantly, if you're playing a deck like Red-Green Smoker or like Green Mihawk that can restand your dong after you play this card, well then you can rest the opponent's entire board and use Electrical Luna to stun everything after that. Now, Shanks is still probably going to be the best user of this card, even though it won't be able to synergize as well with Electrical Luna without some other ways of restanding dong within your deck that may come in the future, who knows? But just having a 10 cost 12,000 power rush character that rests all the opponent's characters makes it very easy to take back the opponent's board. All in all, I think this card is kind of absurd when people have been complaining about a card like 7 cost Hody for so long as such a good game ender, when this card just feels like that multiplied several times, because just a simple 10 cost 14,000 power rush that gets over all of the opponent's blockers for the entirety of the turn, that is something that I'm going to be fearing for a very long time, and something that you're gonna have to consider when you're playing against green in general forever now, similar to Roger. I give this card a resounding S rank ranking. If we're ranking them in the tiers, then I think that it's better than the Newgate card, and also the Shanks leader I think is an S tier leader. Extremely good generic lead effect that's also very easy to use, as generally though you do want to be resting one dong for your lead effect, you have the option if you are trying to play on curve, like when you're playing Hody on 7, to lock the opponent's characters in that way as well. So I think that this leader is extremely promising if the Mihawk matchup is okay. One more small mention, just because I thought it was fun, is that also in the extra format, Straw Sword is very good with your leader effect as well. Being a 3 cost, essentially stun anything on the board when you use Straw Hat and your leader effect, this card may be a surprising tech card in the extra Grand Battle format, should people play that. Guys, help, I'm being devoured by mosquitoes out here. Jumping straight to purple, we have Kaido as well, who has, again, a very versatile generic leader effect. This leader, when attacking as well as on the opponent's attack, once per turn, dong -1, can reduce one of the opponent's characters by 2,000 power. This basically just spits in the face of purple Katakuri, who basically does this, but only 1,000 counter. So, sucks, but at least this can only go 2 characters, so there is a little bit of differentiating there. But still, power reduction in purple right now is the big thing. You have things like Purple Eroshinante or even Purple Enel, who are running these very powerful power reduction cards like the 7 cost Sakazuki or the 2 cost Gamma Knife, and comboing them with other really powerful cards that handle the opponent's characters based on their power, whether it's Elthor, Mamaragang, or even things like Gum Gum Lightning. And this leader effect may just be the beginning of what we may call purple slop. You have this combo of things like the 7 cost Sakazuki, Mamaragang. The general trend that we've seen with purple leaders recently is that they're only good if they can abuse power reduction, and it seems like Kaido may be able to do that very well with his leader effect, compounded with some other very generically good purple cards like the 7 cost Sakazuki or Mamaragang. Is this going to end up being good? Who knows? Because both 10 cost Kaidos seem to completely disagree with this game plan. The first 10 cost Kaido, a 10 cost 12,000 power blocker, when you return one of your dong cards, you gain that card back active and restand one of your dong cards. This effectively means that when you use your leader effect after you reach 10 dong, you reduce one of the opponent's characters by 2,000 power for free, while also effectively just restanding 2 dong. What you're going to do with this dong, we have yet to see within this color, but still just having a generic way to get back dong once you ramp up to 10 can maybe be generically helpful in purple that wants to get up to 10 dong. I don't see this card being as generically helpful as a card like the Newgate or the 10 cost Shanks has been that we've seen so far, but still in specifically Kaido, where we're presumably going to be getting lots of ramp just looking at the old Animal Kingdom pirate back from ST04, I think that we can imagine that this deck is going to be ramping very hard up to 10, especially since we can still use cards like the 1 cost Queen, the 6 cost King, or the 7 cost Kaido that came out in EB04. One thing that I worry about as the deck can no longer use a card like Onigashima is that it may feel a little bit high rolly in some sense, where if you can find that Queen on 1 dong to ramp up to 6 on your 3rd turn, to then play the 6 cost King to ramp up to 10 on the next turn, then you're really chilling with this deck. But I don't know how this deck's going to function unless we get multiple cards that can double ramp us in the same way that 6 cost King does. Still, if this deck has consistent ways to get up to 10 dong, made easier by the fact that you have 5 life, of course, then I think this deck could be very good, because this 10 cost Kaido, while maybe a little bit underwhelming on paper, will be coming out on what should be your 7 dong turn. So playing out a 10 cost 12,000 power blocker that also helps manipulate your dong on turns to come, I think is just going to be a generally solid card. People have described this card as Foxy buffs as well, but as I'm not a Foxy player, I can't really say if this is going to save the deck or not. Generally, my impression is that this is just going to be a Kaido exclusive card, assuming that you have a lot of ramp tools, but we have to see exactly how this deck is actually going to end up functioning. And the reason why I'm still unsure if Kaido is going to end up playing towards Animal Kingdoms or the generic purple package is because of the other 10 cost Kaido. This 10 cost 12,000 Kaido gives all of your characters without counter in your hand plus 1,000 count, meaning that suddenly you've rid all of the character cards in your hand the burden of being a brick, but it also has a secondary effect where activate main, if it was the turn that it was played, fight, you can then Dome -1, negate one of the opponent's character's 6 cost or less characters, and KO it. This is just a very, very easy way to absolutely decimate a deck like Purple Enel, because even though Purple Enel has removal resistance, being able to negate and KO it in the exact same effect through this 10 cost Kaido is basically going to just lights out for this deck. One interesting thing of note though is that this is worded differently from a card like the 4 cost Black Hole. In the 4 cost Black Hole, you negate a character and then KO it if it's 4 cost or less. But this card, you negate a character that costs 6 or less and then KO it, which means that if the opponent were to increase the cost of their 6 cost, whether it's something like Vadi on the 6 cost Enel or just the Loki in general having extra cost innately, you suddenly can't get rid of it because you can't target something that doesn't cost 6 or less. So I think this card is maybe a little bit worse than it seems on paper, just because people are assuming that you can get rid of a card like 6 cost Loki, but unfortunately that is not going to be the case. So one more very interesting thing of note with this Kaido card is that it works very well with Purple Black King. Because of the way that this card is worded, you can play down the 10 cost Kaido first, use the Purple Black King leader effect to reduce the cost of a character by 2, and then use the effect to KO an 8 cost or less for extremely cheap with this card alone, meaning that even if that Enel has Vadi on his card, that card is no more when you're playing against Purple Black King. Now, is this card going to end up making King viable? In my opinion, no. We'll have to see the other cards, I guess. I think that Purple Black King just has too many issues for him. He's just a fragile leader in general being printed in OP08, so I don't think that he'll actually end up being good, but we can dream. Still though, looking at the cards, I think that the Purple Kaido leader is going to be generically powerful, and I think that there's going to be a lot of ways that you can take that leader, not just in terms of deck building, but also in terms of playing as well. So I'm going to give it a solid A tier. The blocker Kaido I think is going to be generally solid, but probably only usable in Kaido, so I'm going to give it a B tier ranking. And the final Kaido I think once again is probably going to be the best use in Kaido and maybe Purple Black King, but in general I think it's going to be a solid card all around in this deck specifically. I'm still going to give it a B tier, but it's a strong B if that means anything. All in all, I have some pretty good faith in Kaido just because of his leader effect alone, and I'll be excited to see what direction they decide to take the leader effect as well, and if that actually ends up being the correct version of the deck. This is where I'd like to plug my channel. If you're enjoying this video, make sure to like and subscribe. You know, this is just the YouTube thing. If I don't say this, then people are just not going to. And if you don't use your subscription tab, it helps me a lot because I'm now doing YouTube full time, which is going to be very scary, but this is going to be the start of many good things to come. Still though, while I give you a second to scroll down and hit that subscribe button, let's now talk about Black Luffy, the Straw Hat leader of OP17 and probably the nth Luffy leader in a row that we've had. So hopefully this one is not going to be as powerful as the last couple of ones that we've had, but the leader effect seems pretty good because if you have a 12 cost or less character on the board, that character gains blocker. Now this leader effect sounds very weird because you can only play characters that cost 10, but because you're playing black, a lot of your characters will innately have higher cost just because that's the black gimmick. The lore behind this deck is actually very cool as well because giants in the One Piece universe are said to be at least 12 meters tall, so therefore having 12 or higher cost means that they're going to be fuck, dude, I'm getting destroyed by a fucking bee. Anyway, something, 12 cost or less character, giant, good. And then if you have a giant on the board, then it's a blocker as well. And the biggest giant, at least the only one that we've seen so far, is going to be the 6 cost Loki, which is a 6 cost 8,000 power character, which not only gains 12 cost, but also plus 3,000 power on the opponent's turn. This character on play KOs any number of the opponent's characters totaling up to 4 cost, meaning that with any kind of cost reduction, whether it's Ice Age in the extra format or even in the newer formats, things like Lucci or Sakazuki's leader effect, you can therefore KO some really high power characters with this Loki. Against a deck like Green Blue Luffy, you can wipe multiple of the smaller characters on the opponent's board, or you can even KO some of the opponent's mid-sized characters as well. This Loki is just extremely versatile just in black in general, in any sort of removal-based black deck, which gives us a little bit of hope that that version of the deck may actually come back into the meta. But more importantly, in this deck, not only does it KO one of the opponent's characters, but it's also a blocker on the opponent's turn as well, which means that this deck may be very good at dealing with the opponent's board while also setting up his board as well that can slowly mount back their comeback, just making it very difficult for the opponent to actually go for lethal as you line up these very big giants on your board. That would be my bet for how this deck is going to actually end up working if it were not for the 8 cost Luffy, because this 8 cost Luffy is sending me a lot of mixed signals when it comes to this deck. It's an 8 cost 8,000 power rush character which on play draws a card and plays a 2 cost or less character straight from your trash onto the board. This is going to be a generally interesting card, but rush in black has not really been that common, and being able to play a 2 cost or less out of your board also has a lot of questions, whether you're going to play out something like the 2 cost Chopper or some of the other cards that were meant for Brook. Bandai has given us one of the answers for this question with the 2 cost Usopp, a 2 cost 2,000 power character which, if you have a 12 cost or higher character on your board, gains plus 3,000 power, and on on play simply searches the top 3 cards in your deck for an LBAF card and drops the rest into your trash. Now, while the 6-cost Loki tells me that this deck wants to be a more control-oriented deck, controlling the opponent's smaller board while setting up these very large characters is going to make it very difficult for the opponent to actually go for lethal themselves, what this 8-cost Luffy and 2-cost Usopp tell me is a completely different story. Because what this implies to me is that this is actually supposed to be an aggro deck, and Loki is just kind of generic black support in the same way that we've been seeing with all of the other cards that we've seen in other colors as well. Loki's still probably going to be fantastic in this deck, just being a massive blocker that can get rid of the opponent's smaller characters on the turn that it's played, but I think that this deck probably may end up actually just being a 2-cost 5,000 power spam if we get maybe 1 or 2 more cards similar to this Usopp that have an effect similar to the Mr. 1 or Mr. 2, where maybe they're just a 2-cost 2,000, where if you have a 12-cost or more on the board, gains 3,000 power, but for example draws a card on play or reduces the opponent's characters by X cost on play. I think there's a couple of interesting ways that you can maybe take this deck, but for now, of the leaders that we've talked about so far in this video, I'm the most skeptical about this deck just because it feels like a lot of the cards that we've seen already are off theme already. Still, this is the sort of thing that Bandai would be completely aware of in their design phase, so I'm sure that's going to be answered as time comes, but as it stands right now, I think that Luffy's lead effect is very solid on its own, but it has very specific cards that it can work with, though yes, you can do some very funny things like the stage as well as Pirate Docking 5 to get that character up to 12 costs to make it a blocker. I don't know how good that's going to end up being, but who knows, maybe, because you can also play out 2-cost characters with that card as well. There's a couple of interesting things that you can do with this leader effect, but for now, I'm just going to say this is a B-tier leader. I think Loki is an excellent character, maybe not going to be as universally powerful as some of the other cards just because it works best with cost reduction. We haven't really seen all too much cost reduction recently. I think this is probably going to be an S-tier card in the extra format and maybe an A-tier card in the standard format until we get something really broken like Ice Age once again. And then the 8-cost Luffy and Usopp I think are a package together, and together I think that they're probably going to be fine. B tier probably. When you compare it to a deck like Green Blue Luffy, it does feel like it may be lacking a little bit, so we just have to see what crazy things are going to end up getting, because like we said with Green Blue Luffy as well, we thought that deck would be kind of average until we saw something like the 5-cost Buggy. So the second that we get one really good card that can spread out our board, suddenly this deck's going to be in business. So we'll see how they end up breaking this deck. But right now, I'm a little bit skeptical about this deck, but we'll see what ends up coming in the future. I think that decks like Black Lucci or Blue Black Sakazuki can also benefit from the 6-cost Loki as well, should people choose to play that in the next upcoming meta. Could be interesting, I have no idea. But I think it's time that Bandai settles a little bit on making Luffy really good. So it's okay if we have one set where Luffy's not as great, even though Luffy looks great in his leader alt art. Which brings us to yellow with one of the more unique leader effects and not very simple leader effects in OP17. Big Mom is really going to be using Soul Focus to the fullest extent with this leader effect, where every single time that you attack, you have the ability to trash one card. And if you do, the opponent has to make a decision. Either they choose to let Big Mom trash one more card and add a life card to the top of their life, or they get to lose one card at random from their hand. This is very scary. Now, the first part of this leader effect, I'm not actually all too sure about, because this is still going to be trash 2 cards to gain 1 life, which is very similar to the trigger of a card like Amaru. This trigger Amaru has not necessarily been that powerful in the past because 2 cards is actually very heavy for a lot of decks. But this second part of the leader effect is really terrifying because you don't know which card's going to get ripped out. We actually haven't seen very many cards like this in a very long time in the One Piece card game, and I imagine that's because the effect is extremely flippy. If they just randomly get that one card that you need out of your hand, then suddenly you may just instantly lose the game. But I think that for a deck like Big Mom, that is actually going to be fine because it's not a forced effect. The opponent isn't forced to give up one of their cards at random. If the cards that are in their hand are too valuable, they can choose to just give you 1 more life. However, as this deck is yellow, that means that you're probably going to have some really good trigger cards as well. Unfortunately, we haven't seen any of the new Big Mom Pirate type trigger cards in OP17, so it's hard to say exactly what kind of gimmick they may end up having. But if these cards are, for example, a 3-cost 4,000 power character that on play draws a card, trigger, play the card, then we may end up being in business because the 10-cost Big Mom is going to be one of the biggest game enders that exists within this game if you can manage to line up your board with 4,000 power trigger characters. This 10-cost 12,000 power Mom makes all of your 4,000 power characters with trigger 8,000 base power on your turn, while also having the on-play effect of drawing 1, and you, the Big Mom player, get to choose if you want to add 1 life to your life pile or peel one of the opponent's life. Generally, healing 1 life in the One Piece card game is effectively a card advantage of 2, because you get to stop 1 attack with that life, and also you get 1 card which presumably has counter, which can maybe stop 1 more attack. Being able to draw a card on top of that means that this is basically just a +3 advantage, while assuming that your characters are all 4,000 power and trigger, maybe something like the homies, then suddenly maybe this deck is going to have a lot of very big firepower on the board as well, if you can manage to survive up until that point. And this deck most certainly will survive up to that point if you keep using your leader effect.
Editing Kai here. Sorry, I didn't fully explain what I wanted to explain about this card because I was dying in the heat. So let me tell you a little bit more about this card. Because this makes all of your 4,000 power characters 8,000 power and also has the ability to peel one of the opponent's life, not only can you use this defensively, like I just mentioned, but also offensively, this is just a 10 cost 12,000 that draws a card, peels 1 life, and also suddenly, if you have 4,000 power trigger characters on the board, effectively gives you 16 dong worth of power onto your board immediately, which is really terrifying against a lot of decks. Whatever support that we may end up getting, if it's a deck that ends up just lining up a bunch of 4,000 power trigger characters, which it seems like it's going to be, then I think that it may actually be quite scary. And being yellow, you know, you also have things like Borsley at your disposal as well to just stall a ton of time while these characters put in the difference. Still, though we don't know any of the new Big Mom Pirate cards, there is one card that I think could be very interesting in this deck, and that is the 3-cost Bonnie. This is a 4,000 power character with trigger that also has a very good effect that draws you cards. This is very important when it comes to your leader pet because you may be trashing a lot of cards by healing your life constantly. So a card like this that can give you a 2-draw 1 trash when you take one of the opponent's life cards that also becomes 8,000 power once you reach that 10 dong turn seems pretty good to me.
My prediction is that this deck's going to end up being a homies deck, where you're playing these smaller characters like Prometheus or Zeus or something that have smaller stat lines and little strong character effects like the 2-cost Zeus. But once the big mom, the new 10-cost 12,000 power mom comes onto the board, suddenly they get angry, they get really powerful, and they suddenly come to close out the game. I think that this is probably going to be the nature of the deck. We don't know exactly how those cards are going to end up functioning until we see them, so I'm going to be very excited for that. But this is going to be one of the cards that's going to be the most shrouded in mystery until we actually see all of the support, because this card is not going to just be 1 or 2 good cards. It has to be the sum of all of the parts. This 10-cost Big Mom feels like it's the most specialized card in the OP17 set that we've seen. It's going to be very specifically good in Big Mom, presumably, but not very good in other decks. Maybe you can use it in Yellow Enel, and maybe you can use it in Bella Betty, but in general, I feel like this is just not going to be a card that you're going to be using in other decks aside from Big Mom. So really, it's just going to come down to how good this deck is for the rating of this card. In general, though, I think that the effect is very solid, so I'll be giving Big Mom a B tier. The leader effect, a pretty interesting leader effect, but I think that it can be exploited just if you keep giving them the free life every single turn, make their hand 0. So I'll give it a B tier. But really, I know what you guys are all here for, and that is going to be the blue leader. The final blue leader that Bandai has been keeping secret is going to be one that everyone has been waiting for this whole time to finally come into the One Piece card game. It is going to be the new